Hello, friends. My name is Hans Rueffert, and on behalf of Piedmont Hospital, I am happy to be remotely putting together a meal for you folks at home. I have had the honor of cooking with Piedmont, now for 15 years almost, maybe 12, 13, 14, I don't know, a long time. And am proud to continue that tradition, even when times are a little weird and we don't get to come and be at the wellness center, but we can bring the wellness center home. So I was happy that they asked me to continue our cooking tradition, although usually you get to eat these things as I make them, but you can also eat them when you make them at home. Now, the theme of today's episode or show is on fresh herbs. And if you've been to one of my classes before, I always try to incorporate fresh herbs. And I have an herb garden at home, which the great thing about herbs as an ingredient, but also as a plant, as a hobby, is they thrive on neglect. And so if you think you have two brown thumbs and you keep a house plant alive, herbs are way more forgiving than that. They don't need special soil. They do like a bit of sunshine, but they can even tolerate some shade, and most of them are perennials. Now, if you don't know your annuals from your perennials, annuals usually you have to plant every year, whereas perennials come back every year. So things like fennel, mint, thyme, garlic chives, oregano, they come back year after year. They get better. The sort of the thing with gardening with perennials, they call it sleep, creep, and then leap. So when the first year you plant them, they're kind of sleepy. The second year they kind of creep along, and by the third year you have more than you know what to do with. And particularly with herbs, the more you cut them, the more they split and sort of propagate. So you don't want to baby them. You want to cut them as often as you need them. And so it really is the perfect plant, and the fact that they're absolutely delicious and way better than anything you can buy dehydrated or frozen. So we always try to incorporate fresh herbs, and especially if you see me wearing short sleeves, there's a good chance that I have some kind of herb in the garden that I can go out and grab it, even in long sleeve weather. So today we have limited time. So when we're doing an in-person class, we usually take about an hour and a half, 2 hours. We answer questions, but in this format, I've got to learn to shut up and get to food because we have a small amount of time. I will be diving back into these plus or minus, but what I really wanted to focus on was a great way to utilize herbs in a way that preserves them beyond the herb season, but also makes it easier so you're not having to run out and grab them every single time. You can actually make a pesto. Now, you're probably familiar with the classic pesto, which is things like basil and pine nuts and olive oil and lots of garlic, a little bit of salt, sometimes cheese in there as well. This is kind of more of a straightforward pesto, no cheese, no pine nuts. Mainly there's just a puree of various herbs with lots of garlic and olive oil. And this particular one also has some kale because I had some excess kale in there in my garden that I needed to do something with. But it is the great thing, or at least the fun thing for me, is it's never the same thing twice. So depending on kind of what's growing, what looks good, or what I need to actually sort of cut down, this can alter a little bit, and to me that's kind of fun. So in this particular one, I have a little kale, I have garlic, I have quite a bit of garlic, to be honest, olive oil, a little pinch of sea salt. I also have some fresh mint, some fresh fennel, and right now is the beginning of onion season, and so I do like to grill, and we'll get to these on our finished product, but I like to grill the little spring onions. In this particular case, these are baby Vidalia onions. And so I utilize the greens on that in my pesto, so there's a little bit of the onion greens in there as well. And then I'll save the grilled bulbs for the salad, but they're fantastic in anything, even in hummus. These grilled Vidalia onions, they're sweet, they don't have that sulfuric kind of bite to them that onions often do. They won't make you cry, unless you're really sad to see a small onion ending its journey. But anyway, so we definitely, anytime I can use those, I try to sneak them into things. So this preparation, and I'm not giving you a recipe because quite honestly, if you look up any basic pesto recipe, it's really just a bunch of basil or a bunch of mint or a bunch of whatever the pesto is, a little olive oil and garlic. So load your food processor up with whatever you can find The only thing I would suggest is that the woodier herbs, so these are the herbs, things like rosemary, lavender, thyme, the ones that have these sort of woody stalks, can be really pungent. So if I use them, I use those sparingly, but all of the soft leafy herbs like, again, mint, basil, even lovage, if you're familiar with that one, they do really well in this preparation. So having made a pesto, a couple of ways I want to utilize it. I am going to take a half a pound of butter, and in this particular case I'm using a cultured plant butter. Now cultured doesn't mean it's just been to a museum, although it might have. It particularly means that it is full of probiotics. So they actually are using, much like how yogurt is a cultured food, there actually are live and active probiotic bacteria in here which are fantastic to aid in digestion. I'm using a plant-based one rather than traditional butter just for fun. If you have no problems with butter, and in my case, not only do I not have problems, I need the additional calories. As a gastric cancer survivor, I'm always trying to up my weight. But I have a vegetarian daughter, and we're always trying to find sort of vegan and vegetarian ways to do recipes. And this is a really good brand. It's Greek, and I'm not even going to pretend to pronounce it because I'm going to botch it and offend some of our Greek viewers. But essentially, it is a cashew milk-based butter alternative. But it's really good, and it's got a nice consistency. So I am going to take that starting with one healthy plop. That's about a solid, heavy tablespoon for a half a pound of butter. And this kind of a preparation is called a compound butter. And if you've been to one of my classes, you probably have seen me use a compound butter. Sometimes it'll be a single herb or ingredient. I know I've done the wild onions, so they're called ramps. When we go out and forage those, oftentimes you'll have more than you can use in a given time period before they start to go bad. And they're not fantastic frozen. So what I would do is puree them and then mix them into a compound butter. And this is gorgeous and it is delicious. And then anytime you need that little pop of a kind of that herbal flavor, you can take a little dollop of this, or sometimes I'll take it and roll it in parchment paper to kind of make it look like a saltwater taffy. Like you put it in parchment paper, you squeeze the ends in alternate directions, and it makes this perfect kind of tube. And you can freeze that, and you cut off just a paper thin slice of that, put it on top of your corn on the cob, or a piece of grilled salmon, or whatever it is you're eating. You can put just that little bit of a compound butter on there, and a little goes a long way, but you get that wonderful flavor kind of right as it starts to melt. So this I'm going to set aside. This was just, again, just to show you. In this case, I used a half a pound of butter, but you can always double it. You can use a full pound of butter. And really, even in the half a pound, you can put another scoop in there if you want to, but I don't want it to be overwhelming. Now, I have a little salt in the pesto. So I love a good salted butter, but in making something like this, I would go with an unsalted butter so that I'm not double salting. You can always add more salt. Taking it out, it's a bit of a challenge. Compound butter, super easy, and a million variations on how to do that. But this is just a great way to preserve some of the herbs when you have an abundance of them and you don't want to just let them go to waste. So I'll set this to the side and work on a bit of a salad. Now again, I'm going to be using the same kind of multi-herb kale pesto here, setting that to the side. And we are lucky, I live up in Jasper, Georgia. We have a great little farmer's market, happens once or twice a week. Wonderful people growing wonderful food. And so oftentimes what I will do is kind of let them sell the things they can retail on Saturday, and then Sunday I kind of like to go and say, what will you take for the rest of it? Because typically I'm feeding lots of people, and I love feeding lots of people. That's kind of my thing in life. So I get excited about the spontaneity and the urgency of these ingredients because, number one, I don't know what I'm going to get, and number two, usually I have lots of it, and so I've got to be creative on how am I going to best utilize this. This is Swiss chard. It looks like beet greens, but they're not beet greens. This is a particular plant, and this one is called, I think, rainbow is the variety, because you'll have some that are orange, the stems, some that are yellow, and of course some that are red and kind of pinkish. Now, if you're used to working with kale, where typically you would remove these ribs or the stems because they're very fibrous, these are not so much. Now, the very tip end where this connects to the plant, so when the plant, like any of these greens, it's kind of connected at the bottom, and it'll have this sort of, fibrous center. The very bottoms can be fibrous, but I've already removed that part. But I do want to incorporate this color in here into the salad that I'm making. But let me show you kind of how I do this. I like to what's called chiffonade, which is when you normally roll up greens and you cut them into slivers. But I want these stem ends, I want them to be really bite-sized. I don't want to have it where somebody's struggling with those, because they are a little on the crunchy side, which is fantastic. Anytime you have a salad, it's great to have that little pop of crunch in there. So I'm cutting the stems a little finer than I'm going to cut the rest of this. So let me again, this is the term called chiffonade. You kind of bunch up or roll up the greens. And if you're not good with a knife, you can just do real slow, straightforward. But the less you can smash, the better. So I'm really doing that kind of a chopping or rolling motion. I want to cut through it. And with any greens, anytime you're using a knife, you're kind of oxidizing the greens. So this is something you'd want to kind of do last minute. It'll hold in the fridge for several hours, but when we make the rest of the salad, you could make the base of the salad first and then add the greens in sort of last minute. And that way you're keeping the freshness and the color. But that already on its own would make a gorgeous salad, and it will make a gorgeous salad. But we're going to add that to, this is barley. Now, I have to stress with as much enthusiasm as I can that this is cooked barley. And I say that because one time I just said, oh, you use barley, and someone went and bought a bag of barley and put it in the salad and pretty much broke their teeth. So I feel like it's my duty, my responsibility to say this is cooked or prepared barley. Barley is very inexpensive, but it is it's one of those things that kind of helps slow down your digestion, especially with the blood sugar spikes. And Shayna will talk about all of that kind of stuff in her classes, and it's great to have that resource of a dietitian or a nutritionist that can help kind of talk through the science of that. But as a guy with no stomach, that's very important for me to help slow the digestion so it stays in my GI tract a little longer, but also kind of absorbs the impact of those blood sugar spikes, right? So this is a great way to do that. Things like brown rice, quinoa, millet, amaranth, spelt, but in this particular case, I'm using barley. This is about 4.5 cups, but I'm not sure that I need all of this. I'm going to start with about half of this. And I am not a measuring kind of a person. I have been forced under gunpoint to do it. But this is just guesstimating. This is about 2.5 cups of cooked barley. I'm not worried so much about the quantity. I'm more worried about the ratio. So just kind of bear with me. If you're one of those people that's like trying to write this down and what is he putting in there, let's just put the pencil down for a minute, wait with me as we get to the end of this, and then we can kind of revisit how much I put in there. Because one of the fun things for me is oftentimes when I'm doing these things, I've never quite made this exact salad before. I've made variations on it. So we're going to figure out something together here as we do this. So there, again, about 2.5 cups of cooked barley. Here I have cup and a half of shiitake mushrooms. Now, I did do a quick saute on this. These are now cooled down, but nutritionally, that kind of wakes them up. You unlock some of those things that are inherent in the mushroom. It doesn't taste like a piece of styrofoam, which sometimes raw mushrooms can do, but it really wakes up that kind of umami flavor. So just a little bit of olive oil in a skillet, just got it kind of medium hot, gave it a quick saute, turned it off, keeps them nice and just that nice chew. You know, it's not styrofoamy dry, they're moist and delicious, but there's no residual, there's like a drop of residual liquid in there. Mushrooms are really sponges, and so they're holding that flavor in there. So in goes, say a cup and a half of cooked shiitake mushrooms. Can you use other mushrooms? Absolutely. Whatever you make is your thing. So there are no recipe police, or if there are, they're not going to come knock on your door, especially during this time. So there's our barley. Now, this combination makes a wonderful warm side dish if you're looking for a rice alternative. Shiitakes and barley makes a great soup even. So there's that. And then it's the beginning of corn season, and love fresh corn. I love it raw, or even sometimes I'll take the raw corn and just kind of put it on the grill just to kind of bring out the sugars, caramelize the outside just a little bit. But this is just, as I like to say, it's not cooked, it's threatened. Still got that nice crunch to it. This is 1 ear of corn. And again, this is something you can customize any way you want to. If corn's not the thing at the market and you've got tomatoes, tomatoes would be fantastic in there. Now, into that, I'm going to put our chard, including the little nice rainbow bits here. And I'm trying to kind of cheat the bowl your way because it's a little dark in here. So I'm making sure you can see all the colors happening. So on its own, that is a beautiful and delicious salad. Now, but wait, there's more. I'm going to make a dressing, but I'm going to make it really in the bowl. And so to that end, I have some white balsamic vinegar and some olive oil. And when I make a vinaigrette, it's typically equal parts of the two. So there are a lot of recipes that call for very oil-heavy ratios of that. But I love having the brightness and the pop of a good balsamic. And in this particular case, I'm using a white balsamic because the dark traditional balsamic would make all of these gorgeous colors kind of turn a little muddy in appearance. It would still be a great flavor, but I want to have the appearance of these colors. I want to make sure those shine through in the dish. And to add to that color, remember that plop of pesto that I put, that's a technical term, the plop. So the plop of pesto that I put into the compound butter, I'm going to do about the same now in this salad. So you could make a dressing separate and then pour it on there, but what I'm going to do is kind of put this in one section in the bowl there, and then I'm going to pour in, I'm not going to use all this vinegar. I have about a cup of each in these things. I'm going to put about a half a cup or so of each, and I'm putting that towards one side of the bowl. Yeah, that's about right. And then I just want to break this up a little bit before I start to mix it in there so that pesto and kind of vinegar and oil kind of make their own dressing on the side. And again, you could, if that makes you nervous to do it straight in the bowl, you could put it in a little shaker and make your own. But I won't need to add any additional salt to this or garlic because my salt and garlic are in the pesto. Now, if you're serving this at a get together, every person has their own sort of threshold of saltiness, right? You can get somebody that even before they take the first bite, they're going to reach for that salt shaker. It used to be a time in my young chef career that I took that personally, but then I realized, you know what, it really is a spectrum. If somebody is a smoker their whole life, they're going to have a much higher tolerance of salt than someone who doesn't. And it's also just a cultural thing too. But that is a good looking salad. Now, I wasn't smart enough to set myself a fork, so there's no one here to share this with, so I get to use my fingers. No, but that's the brightness of the white balsamic comes through, and the oil is sort of the fat in this, right? So it's the vehicle that not only carries the flavor and distributes it, but it also kind of acts like the wallpaper paste and holds the wallpaper to the salad. It's maybe a weird analogy, but it holds the flavor to each ingredient. If you didn't have that oil content, it wouldn't stick and you would have it all run off. And it doesn't have to be olive oil. You can use avocado oil or hazelnut oil or anything, even a mushroom oil if you wanted to, or toasted sesame oil. I don't want to overwhelm you with options, but especially during a time where you might be at home more often, especially during a pandemic or during quarantine, use what's in your pantry. Utilize some of those things that you spent good money on at one point and you think, what am I going to do with that avocado oil? It's a great place to use it. All right, now let's plate some of this up. So we have crunch from not only the fresh corn, but also the stems of the chard. We have a little chew from the shiitake mushrooms and the cooked barley, and then we also have the kind of the leafiness, the greens from the leaf part of the chard. That's an amazing salad. It's nutritionally dense, lots going on there flavor-wise. I always kind of feel like if I'm eating a salad where everything is just kind of the same texture, same size, same everything, I get bored with it. So I like to have these kind of options. But I also like to have additional crunch in the form of like a cracker, and this is a Parmesan cheese crisp with exactly one ingredient. You want to guess? Yes, it's Parmesan cheese. Where you just put it on a baker's mat in the oven until it melts and gets crispy. So that's a great thing to have on there. You can kind of use it as a scoop. Let me just kind of put it at the back here so we're showing the whole thing. And then I mentioned these grilled baby Vidalia onions. They're super mild, wonderful, kind of nice texture to them. And then lastly, on here, I have these little tiny watermelon radishes. Now these are, they're gorgeous more than anything else, but they're a little spicy. You know, if you're a radish fan, radishes have a little bit of a tinge to them. These are not quite wasabi spicy, but they do have a little pop to them. And again, they're just gorgeous. I always say you eat with your eyes first. So the more color, the more texture, the more flavor, it just adds to it. So we'll put some of those on there, and that really is a delicious spring summer salad, but you could make variations of this all year round, but using those herbs in a way. In fact, now that I'm saying that, since we're eating with our eyes, I've got these chive blossoms that I need to do something with. Let's put that little guy on there just for fun and contrast, and why not? But sitting down to a bowl like this is, again, it's nutritionally dense, but it's also sort of soul recharging, that you get to make something fun and delicious and utilize things that you grew in your own garden, or you poached from your neighbor's garden or from a city garden. They grow everywhere. Nobody's going to get mad at you for taking a little mint from the community garden. And if they are mad, tell them I said it was okay. So I love coming to Piedmont and doing these in person, live and in person. But if you're looking for more ideas like this, there are other chefs doing things here, right here with Piedmont Hospital. But if you'd like to see more of what I do have a lot of videos online, and you can learn a lot about this style of food. Now, me being a stomach cancer, gastric cancer survivor, a lot of the things that I've learned during this journey are not trademarked for gastric cancer. These are things that anybody that eats food, and that's a pretty wide umbrella, will benefit from this kind of knowledge. And I've learned so much working with Shayna at Piedmont, as well as the other chefs on how to make food that is, again, it's delicious, it's nutritious, and it's inspiring. If you have questions, I'd love to hear them. You can find me on pretty much every social media. I kind of go by Hans Cooks. Thanks so much for spending some time with me in the kitchen, or this makeshift kitchen. And thanks to our friends at the Old Mule House for letting us use the space tonight. Take care of yourself, be well, eat well, and Gesundheit. Thank you, friends.